Hello YouTube, welcome back. If you ever plan to visit the northern rivers of New South Wales in Australia at the very start of spring, which is September, one thing you shouldn't miss out on is the Taste Food Festival, which this year is being held in the Bangalow Showgrounds. And I am walking around possibly 3 dozen stalls from just about every restaurant, cafe, food provider in the area, and all of them have come here to show you their wares. They don't have all the dishes that they have at the restaurants, but they have a sample of their cooking, and all the sample plates are $5, $10 or $15, and you can fit in a few of at least the $5 plates before you start feeling full. Get yourself a decent lunch. Enjoy the sense of local community that does exist around the northern rivers. I'm seeing a mix of locals and tourists here. Lots of smiles on lots of faces, and the stalls just go on and on and on. So no point going into any individual one to show you, but it's a great place to sample the fine food that you do get up here. And that's a kind of manufactured segue, if you like, into the topic for this video, which is what you feed your macadamia trees at this time of year. Let's get back to the farm. I'm now back in block 2 of Nutkin Farm, walking along a row of 660s, I think they are here, or possibly 333s. Not quite sure which, but the flowering is very impressive compared to previous years, and I'm happy with what I see. I've been mowing between the trees here. All these rows were slashed earlier, but you come along and mow between the trees because the trees need some feeding, and the fertiliser is normally in macadamia farms spread in what's called the tree row. That is the line between this tree stump and the next tree stump. So fertiliser gets spread along a row. It's not dumped at the base of each individual tree. There's usually a line, and in that line you'll get most of the roots of the macadamia tree, and assuming that there's a bit of spread along the ground, it will go out under the root zone of the tree and feed it. So this block's been prepared for that, and again, it looks nice, doesn't it? The traditional wisdom of agronomists in the height of the macadamia price was to feed your macadamia trees little bits and often, and that the trees would perform better if you did that rather than just pile on one big feed or 2 big feeds in a year. But that was advice given for the times, and times have changed. The macadamia price has fallen. Fertiliser prices have changed a great deal, making some fertilisers more expensive than others, which I'll come to. And the number of times you put fertiliser on has a very big impact on the cost, because the cost of spreading that fertiliser with a contractor or even doing it yourself is quite high. And obviously, farmers have to try and work out a way of doing things profitably. I mean, the science of agronomy is kind of funny for macadamia farmers, because you're trying to work out what's good for the trees, but also what's good for your bottom line. And it's hard to do that when you don't know the price you're going to be paid for those macadamias until the harvest is just about to be taken in. So there's some leap of faith involved in even doing this investment in the first place, particularly where the price of macadamias has been low. We're all hoping for a bit of a rise, and driving around the northern rivers, I do see people getting ready to fertilise their blocks. So I think on average, farmers are going to put the money in the hope of getting some money back. But what do we feed in a low price environment that will get you the crop at the lowest possible price without wrecking the health of your trees? And that's a really good question. One way you can do agronomy, and it's a very simple way, is you look at the kilos of nutrient, the main nutrients that you put into these trees per hectare. So kilos of nitrogen, kilos of phosphorus, kilos of potassium. You look at those global needs and then back calculate to which fertilisers will provide those needs at the best possible cost, and in a way that is hopefully slow release if you're going to do it all at once, or at least, you know, something that won't leach and run away the first time a rainstorm comes. So I've gone through the various options with Norco, and a big shout out to the agronomists at Norco who help farmers make these decisions based on the cost of available products that they can supply. And it's very valuable information. I asked the agronomist I talked to at Norco to compare the available foods with what I need to put down to support a crop. The first thing he said to me is don't even bother with granular feeds, because the granular chemical feeds that we were all doing in 2019 and 2020 have become much more expensive since the Ukraine war, and they don't really deliver the nutrient a tree requires at a decent price. And even then, after that, the chemical feeds don't actually help the soil terribly much. They're just providing soluble nutrients which can wash away in the rain. They can get to the roots of the tree quickly and give them a boost. It's absolutely no doubt about that. But in terms of side benefits like a contribution to soil carbon or covering over exposed roots, they don't provide any benefit like that at all. So for the sake of this video, I'm also going to write off granular feeds. But I'd been a fan in the last couple of years of a product called Silica Booster, which is a pelletized chicken manure product with added silica from diatomaceous earth and added other trace elements like boron and a few other things to make it a very complete plant food. And I had seen good results, particularly with, you know, heavier doses like 2 tonnes a hectare in my hungrier blocks like the A16s. So I asked the agronomist, well, what will that give me? Will that give me enough 2 tonnes a hectare of Silica Booster to support my macadamias for the year? And he said, no, you're going to need about 5 tonnes a hectare in order to do that. And even with 5 tonnes a hectare, we worked out that what it would give my trees was 170 kilos a hectare of nitrogen, 75 kilos a hectare of phosphorus, 142 kilos a hectare of potassium. And then there's all the other trace elements which we're not really looking at the moment for this purpose. We're talking about the main nutrients that a macadamia tree needs. So that's an expensive option. I then said, well, why don't we compare that with cow manure for the same price? The same amount of cow manure for the same price of that amount of Silica Booster would get me about 10 tonnes a hectare, so about double the amount of manure in terms of tonnage for the same price. But when we work out the nutrient value of that, that gives about 200 kilos a hectare of nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium, higher in every respect than the Silica Booster for the same price. Now, why is it 200 kilos? Well, cow manure is one of those manures that, I mean, any manure varies, of course, but the general rule of thumb is that the cow manure has equal amounts of nitrogen, phosphorus and potassium. And so for, you know, working calculation purposes, it's a 1-to-1-to-1 ratio. So on that analysis, doing a cow manure blend is better than putting down Silica Booster at the same price. Just working out how many kilos of each nutrient goes into the tree. You can look at other benefits, and I'm not entirely off the idea of Silica Booster for my orchard. because it is a very complete plant food. It's got some nice nutrients in it, and I'm a big believer in silica, which is something you won't find terribly much of in cow manure. However, at least for the old blocks, the decision is somewhat taken out of my hand, and for the very best of reasons. Nutkin Farm has qualified for a state government grant. It's a flood relief grant. It's a very limited one, but it's one that I could qualify for given my own circumstances, and it's a grant to ameliorate flood damage, that is loss of organic material, loss of soil, etc., on my farm from the 2022 floods. And it's a very delayed process. It's a very lengthy process to qualify for a grant, and I was not entirely sure I would qualify, but the kind of relief I could get under the grant was material that could cover up root exposure left by the floods or exacerbated by the floods, which you see there. And you can also see some of the lime I put down earlier. It's still sort of hanging around. Now, you don't put down pure cow manure for that, because you'd need enormous amounts of it to cover roots over. What you do need is a mulch, and the mulch I am getting is 50% cow manure, 50% wood chip. And it's spread along the base of these trees here, so that exposed roots like this one will in all probability be covered over, or at least largely covered over. That helps the roots function again, and once they're covered over, the feeder roots that come through that wood chip will grab onto those nutrients over time and benefit the tree much more than the effect of just the fertiliser alone, much more than working out how many kilos of nitrogen, that sort of thing. The pelletised products do give some bulk, but they're never going to give you a coverage of the root exposure, because they're all too nutrient rich, and certainly nothing in terms of bulk covering capacity to fix erosion problems that have happened with a great big wash of water over time. So that's the plan for the old blocks. I'm going to be putting that particular spread over my old blocks of trees. Pick something different for the new blocks. It may still be manure. Like I said, the agronomist's gone through it and said, if you want the most bang for your buck these days, it's manure. And just to give myself a little bit of extra reassurance, I drove around the really serious macadamia producing areas in Tregeagle, Alphadale, Lindendale, Rouse, where you've got the very big farms. And I did notice outside, or just inside many of those farms, are enormous piles of either cow manure, chicken manure, or a wood chip manure blend. And I think the industry is telling us with what we're seeing here that the best available plan for 2023, at least as far as our region is concerned, is either cow manure, chicken manure, or a wood chip mulch containing manure, so that you've got a nice mix of carbon and nitrogen going in at the base of the tree. Of course, there's another reason, not that we need it anymore by now, but the other reason that you want to do a mulch-based product is that El Nino is here, and we're expecting quite a dry spring, quite a dry summer. And any product that can trap available moisture at the roots of the trees and store it just that little while longer, rather than letting it run off somewhere else, is going to benefit our trees during those hot, thirsty days when it's trying to put on oil into, hopefully, a nice crop of nuts. And by the look of this flowering, that is quite possible. Thanks for watching, guys. As always, lovely to have you along for the journey, and I will talk to you again soon.